This Voice of San Diego podcast is sponsored in part by Competitive Edge Research. As a nonprofit news organization, Voice of San Diego depends on our members, foundations, and sponsors like Competitive Edge Research. We are very grateful for all of our supporters, and we will recognize their support during the show. Competitive Edge Research, San Diego's premier public opinion research firm, sponsors this podcast because they like good journalism as much as they like good polling. Since 1987, Competitive Edge has helped clients see the why buried deep within the numbers. Competitive Edge designs comprehensive research studies, collects bulletproof data, and employs robust analytics so you'll understand why things are the way they are. Competitive Edge. Know what to do. And if you like Voice of San Diego's work and want to become a sponsor, contact us at development@voiceofsandiego.org.
My name is Luciana Corrales, and I live in the neighborhood of Seaview in Ocean View Hills in Otay Mesa. I'm supporting Vivian Moreno because I think she's the best candidate that sees the same vision that all of our neighbors are looking for, which is safer streets, more police officers in our community. She supports Safe Routes to School program, which is very important in our community because we do have a lot of traffic in our area. And I like the endorsements that she has received so far from David Alvarez, Councilwoman from National City, Alejandra Solis, Mary Salas. So as you know, in San Ysidro, we are divided by Chula Vista and National City. So to have the support from our neighbors, the city neighbors in our community, that means a lot to me.
My name is Francisco Martinez. I live in Barrio Logan, and I will be voting for Antonio Martinez for City Council. Some of the biggest issues in the Barrio Logan community are gentrification. There's a lot of family members being displaced because of the revitalization. A lot of the businesses coming in are attracting folks from the outside, which is raising the rent, causing people to move out. Another issue is pollution in the air. The 5 freeway and the Coronado Bridge and the industry in the neighborhood is creating a lot of pollution for our infants and for our elderly.
Those are two voters in District 8 of the San Diego City Council. I'm Scott Lewis. This is another special election edition of the Voice of San Diego podcast. Welcome to those of you listening on News Radio 600 Kogo. Of course, I'm here with my friend Andrew Keatts.
How's it going?
Well, how are you?
Doing all right.
And my friend Sara Libby.
Hello.
Hello. So District 8 is an open seat in 2018 as far as the election goes. It's right now represented by David Alvarez. Let's talk about the district for a minute. It covers the south side of the city of San Diego, Barrio Logan, Greater Logan Heights, San Ysidro and Otay Mesa. So what is Greater Logan Heights, by the way, Andy?
Well, basically, the Logan community was bisected by the 5 freeway. Mm-hmm. And so on the one side of that became Barrio Logan, on the other side, Logan Heights. If you spend much time there, people you talk to will refer to it all broadly as just Logan.
Okay. So, of course, the city of San Diego isn't just one contiguous geographic area. There's a sort of island, and that is San Ysidro and Otay Mesa. And so this district includes them as well.
Yeah, and when you talk to David Alvarez or anybody in that council office or these candidates, you often hear a lot about, well, that's a big issue in the northern part of our district, or that's a different big issue in the southern part of our district, because naturally they have some different concerns because they're separated by like 15 miles.
Yeah,
right.
It's really large geographically.
Yeah.
Right. So there are 2 people now in the runoff for this seat. One of them is Vivian Moreno. Vivian Moreno has been Alvarez's community representative for a few years now. She's running for the job, though. She wants the top job. And the other side, Antonio Martinez is a member of the San Ysidro School Board. He works with the Nestor Community Health Center. And he says he's a friend of Alvarez's, but thinks he can perhaps get the job done a little bit better. So we interviewed both of them over the last several months. I think it's fair to say that they have their kind of ticks that they turn to. Martinez must have told us a dozen times that he wanted the district to to get its fair share.
I really want to make sure we get our fair share, advocate for their fair share, and really demand our fair share. So we're asking for our fair share, and that's what I'm running on to get there at City Hall and get our fair share. When we're asking for our fair share, obviously we need a bigger piece of the pie in terms of the budget to complete those projects. You demand from City Hall that we get our fair share. But I also think that we need to get our fair share. I want to come in and make sure we're all working together to get District 8's fair share. A lot of employees, they don't have a voice, and especially if they're not union, they don't get their fair share.
On the other side, I actually ran into Vivian Moreno the other day. She said she regretted how timid she was in our interview and was going to work on that. But yeah, many of our biggest questions about the district and the city went to Moreno, and she came back with, I don't know.
I don't know. To tell you the truth, I don't know how I would have voted. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know right now. And I don't know. So I don't know.
In a sense, they're both sort of tapping into something. To Moreno's point, we don't know how a lot of things in the district are going to play out. There's a lot of uncertainty about some specific long-term issues that it's facing. And then to Martinez's point, for a long time, people in the district have believed and may have some reason to believe that they aren't getting their fair share of city services, of city attention, of the priorities of some of the problems that are happening in that district were happening in La Jolla. It seems like they might be a bigger priority for the whole city in general. And so this is an argument about who will be better in this role, but it's also a long-running argument, right? This is kind of a battle, latest battle of a long series of rivalries in the South Bay, right?
Yeah, I think it's fair to call it a proxy war at this point. And interestingly, I mean, the seat of power in South Bay politics has always been with the Democratic Party, but there have nonetheless been factions within the party, and pretty severe ones, pretty cavernous gulfs between these two camps. I think they most notably broke down with Bob Filner and Juan Vargas. Bob Filner used to be the congressional representative for the South Bay. Juan Vargas is now. They famously did not ever really get along.
Vargas primaried Filner when he was a congressman several times, and never quite ousted him. But there was each one of those fights was super bitter.
And they both had been city council representatives as well before that. So and so there was these factions along with Juan Vargas. Some allies that have always been associated with him were Ben Hueso, who's now in the state senate and also used to represent this area. And then on the other side, you had with Bob Filner, it was like Mary Salas. And then kind of floating between them, but important here, is Denise Ducheney, who also represented this area.
Former state senator.
Former state senator. And she had a staffer at one point named David Alvarez. When David Alvarez ran for city council in 2010, he ended up getting sucked into this long-running faction, warring between factions down here. He didn't really have a horse in the race at that point. He was kind of pulled into it by default because one of the people he ran against was the brother of Ben Hueso, who was vacating that seat to go run in Sacramento. But his brother, Felipe Hueso, ran against David Alvarez. And David ran a campaign that was very outsider, anti-establishment, pointing out the things that have gone wrong in the district and why that has been the case at City Hall. And despite the name identification advantage that his brother had, or that Felipe Hueso had because of his brother, David won, and it wasn't even particularly close.
Yeah, to the surprise of many, we were all watching that election. I guess it would have been 2010, and it was just shocking. Hueso had a lot of support of major unions, and Alvarez had some. I think he had like the firefighters or something, but mostly labor was behind Hueso, Felipe Hueso. Hueso had the name, the family. It was a very powerful network he had, and it didn't work.
And it might have ended there. You can imagine a version of local political history where you say, well, so be it. David wasn't supposed to win, but he did win, and now he's probably going to vote with us 95% of the time, or 100% of the time, or 90% of the time. But it didn't really end there. There's a couple other examples of when this rivalry has been sort of renewed again. One of those, famously, was in 2013. Bob Filner resigned. The mayoral seat opened up. Nathan Fletcher, who was a new Democrat at that point, announced a run for Congress. For mayor. And very quickly, he got the endorsements of Juan Vargas, Ben Hueso, Lorena Gonzalez.
Oh, yeah.
Also joined with him. And Mickey Kasparian, who was not willing to get involved with Fletcher and didn't like Fletcher, went looking for a candidate, and he found one in David Alvarez. And so during that primary fight between Fletcher and Alvarez, suddenly this proxy war that Alvarez had been pulled into was renewed again. And it had broken down on the same lines, and he was fighting against these same people. And now here it is again. His staffer, Vivian Moreno, is running for the seat. Antonio Martinez is running, and who has endorsed him? Juan Vargas, Ben Hueso, Lorena Gonzalez. So it is in some ways a very odd thing, because no one will tell you that these people have divergent views on policy. Now, not to say that they necessarily agree on everything, but they don't have. It's not like a Democrat versus a Republican thing where they have fundamentally different ideologies. It's really personal at this point,
or even really like a problem with Vivian Moreno, who worked for David Alvarez. She's the one that he chose and wanted to support, and it's not like they have big problems with her, from what I can tell. She says she tried to call them and they haven't called her back. Some of these people that endorsed Martinez, and so it's kind of an interesting. It's just the in that sense, whatever longstanding rivalry is there in the alliance, that's what played the role, right?
I asked her a number of times. I spent the day with her canvassing not too long ago, and I kept asking, what remains of this dispute? Why are you part of this now? Why is Antonio part of this? Neither of you are named Alvarez or named Hueso. You don't have. There's no blood reason that you're involved in this dispute. And Vivian just simply said, David was not supposed to win.
Mm.
It's especially interesting if you think about it in the context of the other council races that are happening, because if you look at, D2 and D6, it's just so straightforward. Republican versus Democrat, incumbent is being challenged. And in D4 even, you have two Democrats, but I think it's fair to say they have very different visions and approaches and styles. And here you have people who probably on paper look almost exactly the same as far as their positions, but it's only this very deep history in the district that you can start to really discern where things are.
Yeah. Well, let's get into some of what we can identify as the distinguishing sort of perspectives they have. So one of the biggest issues in the district is the future of the community plan in Barrio Logan. So community plan sets the zoning, what you can build, where, how many houses you can build, all that sort of thing. And updating those community plans are always contentious in some areas, but in Barrio Logan in particular, you're dealing with two very different things. On the one hand, you have people who want to live there and want to live in nicer circumstances as far as parks and cleanliness and all that. And on the other hand, you have a very powerful shipbuilding and sort of maritime industry, right? And so right now, is it fair to say you can build whatever you want in Barrio Logan, and you can put it right next to a house if you want to? So there can be a welding shop right next to a home.
Yeah, the way the zoning works there is virtually unlike anywhere else in San Diego County in terms of allowing what we would call incompatible uses to go next to each other. It's very much an anything goes type situation.
Okay, and so the issue was to update the plan and say, no, here you can build residential, and then over time we're going to phase out some of these welding shops and other things, and they're going to have to be in their own areas, and that's going to have a buffer between the residential areas, right?
Yeah, so yes and no. It's slightly complicated in that so you have the shipyard. The shipyard gets most of the attention here. But no one is really proposing any changes to the shipyard itself. The area where they build ships on the water is envisioned to remain that way forever by basically everyone. It's these small, isolated industrial shops in the community itself that people have problems with. The idea would be, as you say, they would get phased out over time because their zoning would be changed. And then you would have this area, basically, so you've got the railroad tracks, You've got Harbor Drive, and then on the other side of Harbor Drive, you would have a 2-block buffer area where you'd be able to have some very lowish level commercial spaces, but not homes and not very heavy industrial. So then between the railroad tracks, Harbor Drive, and this 2-block buffer area, you'd have a sizable gap between the residential areas to the north and the shipyard to the south.
Right. And so most of that, both sides could mostly agree on that. It's just in that particular stretch of land, what you could actually put there became so contentious that the ultimate deal they came up with was so bad, according to the shipbuilding industry, that they had to throw it out through a referendum.
Yes.
All right. So that takes us to, we asked Martinez, so that the referendum worked.
Yes.
Spoiler.
They won. Citywide vote came in and overturned what had been the product of the community planning process. And this was one of the things you'd hear people say, well, you might be surprised how many people in Barrio Logan actually feel about this. But it was conclusive in the end that the precincts in the Barrio Logan area voted strongly to maintain the community plan. The rest of the city overwhelmed them. So it was a citywide vote that vetoed what the community had wanted.
Yeah, this is like the most clear distillation of Antonio Martinez's message that they're not getting their fair share, right? They voted for something, and for some reason, the rest of the city was allowed to come in and say, no, you don't get to decide this thing about your own community.
Yeah, that's right. And one other point that I think is really profound in here was Georgette Gomez, who's now a city council member for the 9th District. When I first met her, she was working for the Environmental Health Coalition, which was a nonprofit organization that was involved heavily in the community planning process around this community plan. And when we met for the first time for coffee, this was 6 or 7 years ago, I was covering some other land use and development related issues that were around the rest of the city, which are based on density, transit-oriented development, that sort of thing. And I asked her if they had spent much time thinking about those things in the plan. And she's sort of befuddled. And she said, that would be a luxury for us to be able to think about those things. We didn't have, we're worrying about this most basic thing about whether we can healthily live here. Mm-hmm. It would be great, she told me, if we had the ability to care about that. But we had to use all of our capital on this other fight. So when I think about like fair share, that to me really distills a fair share question that is at stake at this community. And so, but the hard part is that industry is big and it hires and a lot of people, including like Alvarez's brother. Yeah, David Alvarez's brother works at the shipyard. Like it's a very tangible economic benefit to have those high paying jobs right there. And so the question is, can they live together? Because what this vote and this controversy, I think, really revealed to me was, I don't know if they can. And so we asked Martinez this in his interview with us, like, can this really work well together or not? Do you think the shipbuilding industry and the residents can live together into perpetuity?
You know what? I don't know. I think that's a conversation we have to ask.
So we asked Moreno what she thought would happen with this plan and, what she would do to shepherd it through. And yeah, I specifically asked her some version of the same question, which is, have we reached this irreconcilable point that somebody needs to just demonstrate some leadership and choose one of these two visions? That should we stop discussing whether there's a magical compromise that we can negotiate? Yeah, we had asked Christian Ramirez this, the other guy running for that seat, and remember he was like, I don't think they can work together. Yeah. Like we need to maybe just draw it out for residents and start to phase out this group.
I voted against the referendum.
You voted against the referendum.
Just to be clear, I voted against it. I don't know what the plan update is going to look like, and I don't know what the next Barrio Logan plan update is going to look like, so I can't answer that.
We weren't asking her to predict it, though. Why do you think she needed to clarify that she didn't vote for the referendum? Wouldn't that be just assumed?
I don't know if it would have been assumed.
Really?
I mean, it would have been my guess, but it's worth stating clearly.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what could happen with it? Do you think a new mayor is needed to bring this forward, or is this going to be Are they ever going to bring this forward again?
About this time a year ago, the mayor attempted to reignite this process. Community planners went out to the Barrio Logan Community Planning Group, which used to not exist. That's actually a relatively new organization.
It was born out of this controversy.
After this controversy, yeah, exactly. And they basically said, well, let's see if we can figure out a way to redo this. And I remember going to the meeting thinking, the fundamental point over which they disagreed hasn't changed at all. Why would anything be different than it was in 2014 when voters finally threw it out? And it became very clear at that community planning group that nothing has changed. It's still the same fundamental question. And, what Mayor Filner did when he was in charge was say, we are going to make this decision that sides with the community. Mayor Faulkner, who was running for mayor at the time that the referendum campaign was going on, took the other side and said, the shipbuilders are right. This is too important as a regional asset. We can't risk it. I think unless Mayor Faulkner decides to really push forward with something, I think it'll be the next mayor will decide what happens there.
Well, one of the issues that the district is facing and that this fair share question comes up a lot in is homelessness. So we all know about the very pervasive and prevalent homelessness downtown and in surrounding areas, the beaches and such. But there's another big pocket and concentration of homelessness in San Diego. It's at the border at San Ysidro and Otay Mesa. And it's very big and it's a very scary problem. Some of these schools, we did some reporting, Maestro Krishnan, in the area. Some of these schools are dealing with like 30% of their students homeless, and not just visible homeless. Some were living in junkyards or couch surfing or in RVs all over the place, concentrated there in particular in some cases because of connections they have to people who were deported or other circumstances. The kids might all have citizenship, stuff like that. And it's a really disturbing trend. But there was also concern in the district that so many of the resources to serve homelessness are often located in the district. We're going to talk about that and more after the break. If you're on the podcast, if you're not on the podcast and listening on our partner station, News Radio 600 Kogo, well, consider downloading our podcasts from your favorite podcast app. This has been the Voice of San Diego on podcast and then on the radio with News Radio 600 Kogo.
The following is a sponsored message from American Medical Response. Voice of San Diego is a nonprofit, and a majority of our budget comes from listeners and readers like you. But we also depend on revenue from grants and advertisers to maintain independence and produce more of the hard-hitting journalism you expect from us. When accidents, injuries, or emergencies happen, American Medical Response is there. American Medical Response has been caring for patients in San Diego County for over 65 years. As an exclusive 911 emergency medical response provider within the community, AMR wants to remind you to stay safe, San Diego. To learn more about AMR, visit amr.net.
We're back. We continue our story about District 8 and the open seat. It's going to be an interesting one to watch, and we wanted to give as much as we could about what drives the candidates and what we know about them. All right, so here was Vivian Moreno talking about that sort of fair share issue with regard to, so many of the housing and the shelter issues being located in District 8.
For the weight of this issue to be placed on the shoulders of District 8 it's not fair and it's not balanced.
And then Antonio Martinez had a similar take on KPBS.
This is another example of how District 8 has been shortchanged. To have a homeless facility located literally a block away from an elementary school, and while the notion of a homeless storage facility is a great idea, I just think the location is god-awful.
Moreno drove it home with her interview with you, Andy, on this point. It's really touched a nerve.
I'm gonna be just really honest here. People are defecating. Mm-hmm. People are urinating. People are masturbating. on sidewalks. No kid, I don't care what color you are, no kid should have to see that. No kid in San Diego should have to see that. Now, with that being said, is it the city's full-hearted responsibility? Not when the county is responsible for human and health services. The county's sitting on $84 million as we speak. I think it's a responsibility of the whole region.
So Martinez had this similar point, wanted to get more involved in housing. He was just a lot less clear, I think, about what he would specifically want to see happen. And Moreno came in and really wanted to make a point that the city needed to identify housing. It needed to identify how many it was going to build and really drive towards something, right?
Vivian had just been endorsed by the new group, the YIMBY Democrats of San Diego. At the time that we talked, I asked her, I said, so I assume it does, but does this mean you're a YIMBY? And she was kind of scoffed and said, yeah, absolutely. And that the single most important thing that the city could do is build more housing of all types, build more housing at all income levels. And one way she wanted to see that be done was by choosing a number, the number that economists say is needed to restore balance in the housing market here, and kind of collectively push to that number.
We actually need a number, one, and then we need to talk about how do we get there, right? Is it incentivizing staff?
Yeah.
Are we talking about bonuses, right? Are we talking about helping the developer get through maybe some environmental hurdles, right? That we need to...
What about direct subsidies?
I can't say that am I ready to say, yes, I'm going to subsidize, a development? I mean, it's getting to the point where it is so difficult, especially for District 8 residents, right? It is so difficult to rent, right? Because a lot of people who are renting should be buying. Yeah. But guess what? There's nothing for them to buy. Right. And what is left for them to buy is ridiculously expensive.
I should also clarify there that when she says bonuses, she's not it came right after she mentioned city staff. She's not talking about giving staff members bonuses for approving projects.
Oh, really?
No.
I thought that's what she was saying, like performance for like getting the approvals through or something.
Yeah, no, I thought that's what it really sounded like that. I think she means density bonuses.
Density bonuses.
Oh, okay. So if you bill in as so many units, you get a few other units or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. So another area where housing has intersected with city policy is this question of vacation rentals. So we just got news this week that the referendum that Airbnb Share San Diego and HomeAway supported to throw out the city's new ban on setting aside homes just for vacation rentals has qualified for the ballot, and thus the city's draconian new restrictions on vacation rentals are basically on hold now until there's a vote of the people or until the city council decides to abandon its push, which there's no way the city council will do that. So this will go to a vote at some point. And you asked Vivian Moreno about this particular issue. It had just been at the city council when you talked to her. It had just passed, and you asked her like what she might have done with it. And this is another area where she had a little uncertainty.
I can't say.
Why not?
Because I think that, being in those meetings, getting briefed, I didn't get briefed by both sides, I didn't, and I don't know, what side we're talking about here.
Another one of those I don't knows. Now, Martinez was much more forceful on this point, actually. He supports heavy restrictions on vacation rentals, and that actually earned him the endorsement of the Save Our San Diego's Neighborhoods group, one of the leading opposition efforts to vacation rentals. And this is what he had to say on that point.
So you have, individuals who, sometimes use it to help pay their rent, which obviously that needs to be regulated. But then you have individuals, or in this case, corporations, that are essentially changing communities. They're buying property for the sake of short-term vacation rentals. And for me, that's highly unacceptable, especially, we want to encourage individuals, especially in my district, to be property owners, to buy their first home. Imagine doing that, and the next thing you know, your neighbor who, is no longer living there, now it's a short-term vacation rental, and then the house next to that is also a short-term vacation rental, and the house next to that is a short-term vacation rental. Next thing you know, the neighborhood that you bought your first home in is not even a neighborhood. It's essentially short-term vacation rental, I don't know, community, if you can call it that.
So that was probably the thing he was most clear on in some ways, as far as, his stance on a major city principle. So there was one area we wanted to vet about his service. So he actually has been an elected official before, and he was a member of the San Ysidro School District. So Sara, you helped us vet this and look at some of their statements. So what did you find out?
Yeah, so the San Ysidro School District, first of all, represents some of the poorest students in California. You mentioned homelessness just in San Ysidro in general. 1/5 of the students in that district are homeless, which is pretty astounding. So the financial mismanagement issues that have plagued that district, that really puts things in perspective, is when you're talking about officials making $1 million in compensation, which is what a former superintendent is accused of kind of duping school board members into giving him this insane compensation package. That's the context that this is in, is those dollars could be serving some really poor and needy students.
So that was their case, that he duped them.
Yeah. At least one board member came out and said, he really pulled the wool over our eyes or whatever, and as far as obscuring kind of what we were okaying.
Mm-hmm.
And several different groups have kind of investigated the San Ysidro School District's finances over the last couple of years, including time periods before and after Antonio Martinez was on the school board.
So he was elected in 2012.
Yes. So they looked at periods as far back as 1997, but also going up all the way till 2018, depending on which audit or report you're looking at. And they were all pretty scathing, to be honest with you. And they found fault in a lot of different places. There was the former superintendent himself and a deputy who are accused of, taking huge compensation and improper payouts. And also the County Office of Ed is supposed to be overseeing things, and they said that they did a bad job, but they also put a ton of blame on the school board members themselves, particularly for not having enough training and for not performing proper oversight. So even though this superintendent is the one accused of the actual wrongdoing, a lot of the blame surrounds they let this happen and they okayed these contracts. So the grand jury report found all these problems with safeguards. And here's what it said about the school board in particular. San Ysidro School District trustees failed to perform their fiduciary duties to the citizens of the San Ysidro School District.
And this is in the period you could say Antonio Martinez was there.
Yes.
Okay.
Trustees lack training and or understanding of their role and responsibilities. Poor decisions by the Board of Trustees significantly contributed to San Ysidro School District financial problems. And there was a state audit released just in June, so really recently, that said executive staff used the board's lack of fiscal knowledge and placed people in positions for which they were not fully qualified, or pressured them so that executive staff could use the district's resources for their personal benefit.
So we asked Martinez about this when he was here. We spent a little time going back and forth, and here was his point on those issues and those concerns about how that all happened.
I'll be honest, when it comes down to that, I know it's still in the midst of a potential lawsuit, so I don't know, at least from our end, how much I can talk about the details. But what I can say is that I think part of what we need to do is to hold individuals accountable who have taken advantage of our community, and to make sure that we do what we can to, if there is misdeeds, to get the money back, because the money belongs to our kids and our community.
So that is all Antonio Martinez and Vivian Moreno as they vie for the District 8 race. So Antonio Martinez has a lot of support from labor, right? Almost all, or?
No. So the Labor Council, I believe as of last night, held an endorsement decision. I don't know how that went. And the building trades will do the same next week, so we don't have any idea where they stand right now.
Oh, okay.
The only one he has confirmed support from the Working Families Council, which is Mickey Kasparian's splinter group.
Right. Okay. And Vivian Moreno got the support of SEIU.
And MEA.
Okay, so the cities, the major public employee unions, at the county and at the city, the white collar union, the MEA. Interesting. So she has some of that endorsement support from other politicians, including Mary Salas, who's part of that sort of same network, right, of the Alvarez Filner world. And then, of course, Antonio Martinez has the bevy of endorsements from Lorena Gonzalez in that world, too. Yeah,
and people have always, one thing that David Alvarez is credited with is having a very effective ground campaign, and that the people around him really know how to canvass a district and knock on a lot of doors. And Vivian has... She was a little cagey. She wouldn't tell me the total number of doors she's hit over the course of the campaign, but they have been canvassing hard. But Antonio's campaign is expected to get. I mean, he's got the Democratic Party endorsement, which I think is the big one here. It makes it very easy to spend more money to communicate to Democratic Party voters. Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second. So we have David Alvarez, who is the representative, the incumbent for this district. It was only 4 years ago when he was the standard bearer of the Democratic Party. He was the guy they put up to run for mayor. Yeah. And he was riding high. They spent $5 million on that race. Like, he was on top of the world as far as Democratic politics there. He was instrumental in getting Filner to resign. A lot of people thought that he had a bright future, and he started to lay the foundation for more, right? And then he set his sights a couple of years ago on running for county supervisor, right? So this is the county board of supervisors has 5 representatives, and the one that represents the South Bay, that seat is open in 2020. So he made it clear he's already running for that. He's already been raising money for it. And yet something's going wrong with his place in the Democratic Party. So he in the meantime decided to run for community college district trustee, that he openly basically acknowledges that he would only stay in that role for 2 years. And he didn't even get the Democratic Party's endorsement for that. Right. And his preferred candidate to replace him on the school board, on the city council, didn't get the support of the Democratic Party. In fact, they weighed in on her opponent. And so you have to feel like something went real wrong with his place in the Democratic Party. So there was this issue that came up in 2016. There was obviously some big elections.
There were lots of issues that year, I feel like.
Kind of a big deal. Well, one of them was Alvarez was really still riding high, I think, from the mayor's race. Obviously, he didn't win, but he was, it
was like the kind of win that sets you up for big things.
Right.
I mean, the kind of loss that sets you up for big things.
Right. Yeah. It was, you never expect to win all your early races or whatever. And so he's kind of riding high, and he decides to run a slate of candidates for the Democratic Central Committee. And this would sort of help in the sense of people like Vivian Moreno could benefit if he loaded this committee with people, right?
Right.
And so he ran a slate of candidates, but Mickey Kasparian, the union leader, had his own slate of candidates he wanted to see on there. And he's like, why did you not consult me? And he said, literally, he took it as a betrayal that Alvarez ran his own slate. And Alvarez went to get money for this effort from David Malcolm, a Lincoln Club conservative group advocate. And, it was kind of a surprising sort of fight. It was another one of these proxy wars, right? And Mickey Kasparian was just livid. And so when Alvarez went to try to become council president after this, a few months later, Mickey Kasparian sided with
Myrtle
Cole, who ended up winning that role. And so the unions really split on that issue. And after that, this split between Mickey Kasparian, the United Food and Commercial Workers, and the Building Trades Council really exploded, right?
Yeah, it did. And then closely followed, it was right around the same time that these allegations of sexual improprieties began surfacing against Mickey Kasparian. And the first of those came from Sandy Naranja, who eventually said that she was fired because of essentially sexual discrimination by Kasparian. Kasparian's defense was, no, Sandy was conspiring against me with David Alvarez. Then later, more accusations came up, and it ended up not being particularly involved in this sort of dispute. However, David Alvarez was the first and most notable politician for quite a while, the only one who openly said, in light of these accusations, Mickey Kasparian needs to step down. Now, he was eventually joined by other powerful people as well, but
so he might have been on the right side of that particular history as far as the Democratic Party coming, or a lot of the Democratic leaders coming out against Mickey Kasparian, but it didn't leave him in a further leadership role. In fact, it seems like he has ended up in a really reduced prominent role as far as the leadership of the Democratic Party in San Diego.
Right, and I guess the question now that we'll get to see is how much that matters to voters. I mean, Vivian Moreno won. It wasn't particularly close in the primary.
Mm-hmm.
David Alvarez won his community college seat in the primary. It was, again, not particularly close. We'll see both of those again in this November. And then for David, we'll see in 2020 in county supervisor whether he gets another challenge, whether he wins that challenge. So, yeah, it seems like he's on the outside of this internal party struggle, but it may be the case that he still knows how to appeal to voters in that district.
And that is District 8. We'll be looking at a couple of other races, and this is a plug. If you care about city politics and you haven't signed up for PolitiFest, what are you doing? I mean, what are you doing? October 6th, University of San Diego. You can go to politifest.org and get your tickets. Come see us. We're going to do a live pod. We've got confirmed, this is the first announcement yet on the podcast, a new live podcast for PolitiFest that afternoon. And it's going to be with the not mayoral candidates. This is not
It's not a mayoral candidate debate.
For the 2020 mayoral election, not something.
It's just some interesting people who have nothing else in common.
Yeah, they are not debating a mayoral race. It's Congressman Scott Peters, Councilman Chris Cate, and Assemblyman Todd Gloria are going to join us for this not mayoral debate on the live podcast. So it's going to be live podcast. We have a lot of audience interactions. Band's going to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun, kind of an easy sort of nice break to the PolitiFest day. So come see that. We're going to have some great games for the audience like we did at the bar that time. So come out and send your questions in too and let us know what you think they should ask. But again, we're going to have more fun with it than just, any kind of staid debate or argument about politics. So please come out. We've got the Soccer City versus SDSU West debate. We've got the forum with the mayors, including Mayor Darrell Steinberg from Sacramento and Mayor Kevin Faulkner and Juan Manuel Gastelum from Tijuana. And the future, I'm excited about this one, the future of California, Assemblywoman Shirley Weber, Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez, and Chad Mays, Assemblyman from the San Bernardino area. He's the Republican former minority leader for this assembly. So future of the Republican Party, future of schools, future of housing, these issues are big. And I can go on and on. There's going to be a ton of great things there. Go to politifest.org. Thanks, guys, for helping me get that together. And today's show, I wanted to give a special shout out to Kinsey Moreland. And she's done a great service for all these podcasts, pushed us along. And Adriana Heldiz, she's was out in the field getting some of that audio and helping us get all this stuff together. So thanks to them and to Adam Greenfield, who helps us master this episode, and others too. So on behalf of our partners at News Radio 600 Kogo, thanks for joining us.
You're listening to the Voice of San Diego Podcast Network. Visit voiceofsandiego.org/podcast to learn more about the rest of the shows in our network. We've got Cura Chaos, a live podcast featuring interviews with movers and shakers from San Diego and Baja California, and The Kept Faith, a sports podcast. Be sure to give them a try, and thanks for listening.